Auschwitz was the largest concentration camp system established within the Third Reich. It's estimated that at least 1.1 million prisoners were killed inside of Auschwitz, with the mass murder that took place inside shocking the world. When the camp was liberated, the Soviet Red Army found many prisoners who had been simply left for dead, and after the Second World War ended in Europe, the time to punish the perpetrators of crimes against humanity came. One man who was brought to trial was Rudolf Höss, the former commandant of Auschwitz, who served for the longest amount of time. However, today, inside of Auschwitz, a gallows still stands, which was specifically constructed to take the life of the man who inflicted such misery, suffering and depravity onto so many people. So join us today as we look at the Gallows of Auschwitz, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. One common method of punishment and deterrent that was used throughout Auschwitz was to execute prisoners by hanging. These hangings often took place during roll call and in the huge yards where this took place. The point of this was to convince the prisoners to remain in complete submission to the guards. These gallows were often very large, and there was one day in which 12 prisoners from the Surveyors' Labour Detail on the 19th of July 1943 were executed on a mass scale. 3 prisoners inside of this detachment had escaped, so the guards dragged 12 prisoners out to the gallows and hanged them in brutal scenes. The gallows were used as a way of punishing those who did escape. Mala Zimmerbaum, a well-liked member of the camp, escaped with her boyfriend, but despite getting outside the camp's walls, they were quickly recaptured. They were then taken to the gallows to be publicly hanged, but things did not go well. Mala's boyfriend struggled and was eventually executed on the gallows, but Mala refused to go down without a fight, calling on the inmates to rise up, and instead of hanging her, she was beaten within an inch of her life, and then was allegedly burned alive inside the camp's crematoria. The gallows were used a lot during the camp's lifetime, and more escapees were hanged. For example, 5 were killed 2 months before the camp was liberated, and 4 women were also hanged for being involved in the Sonderkommando revolt, supplying the rebels with explosives. So executions were very common on the gallows, but after the camp was cleaned up, the surviving prisoners cared for, and many of the staff imprisoned and executed, there was one more life to be taken inside of Auschwitz. 1.1 million had been killed before, but the time of the commandant of the camp, Rudolf Höss, was to come. Höss was the driving force behind the mass murder at Auschwitz, and it was his leadership that led to thousands being executed each day inside of the gas chambers. Höss wrote of the killing process. Technically it wasn't so hard. It would not have been hard to exterminate even greater numbers. The killing itself took the least time. You could dispose of 2,000 in half an hour, but it was the burning that took the time. The killing was easy. You didn't even need guards to drive them into the chambers. They just went in expecting to take showers, and instead of water, we turned on poison gas. The whole thing went very quickly. Höss experimented with the most efficient way of killing, and he killed hundreds of thousands. However, Höss was dismissed from his position after it was accused that he had an affair with a political prisoner. He testified at the Nuremberg Trials after being called as a defence witness by Ernst Kattenbrun's lawyer, and he described in detail how he had overseen many go to their deaths, and he also stated how the staff killed on a mass scale. He said, "I commanded Auschwitz until the 1st of December 1943, and estimate that at least 2.5 million victims were executed and exterminated there by gassing and burning, and at least another 500,000 succumbed to starvation and disease, making a total of about 3 million dead. This figure represents about 70 or 80% of all the persons sent to Auschwitz as prisoners, the remainder having been selected and used for slave labour in the concentration camp industries. Including amongst the executed and burned were approximately 20,000 Russian prisoners of war, who were delivered at Auschwitz in Wehrmacht transports operated by regular Wehrmacht officers and men. The remainder of the total victims included around 100,000 German Jews and greater numbers of citizens, mostly Jewish, from the Netherlands, France, Belgium, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Greece, or other countries. We executed around 400,000 Hungarian Jews alone at Auschwitz in the summer of 1944. He was accused of murdering 3.5 million people, and he replied honestly, "No, only 2.5 million. The rest died from disease and starvation." Following the trials, he was then handed over to the Polish to be tried for his involvement in the Holocaust and the final solution. He revised his death toll at around 1.1 million and even stated that Auschwitz had limits to its destructive capabilities. Höss's trial lasted just short of 3 weeks, and following this he was sentenced to death to be hanged on the 2nd of April 1947. However, the sentence was carried out later, on the 16th. On the day of the verdict, former prisoners petitioned to the court to allow the execution of the former commandant of Auschwitz to take place in a very special place, in the place where he inspired so much suffering. Instead of a prison courtyard or an execution chamber, it was deemed fit for him to be executed inside of Auschwitz, and his execution was rescheduled as it was feared that he would be intercepted by Polish citizens and lynched. However, inside of Auschwitz, a special gallows had been created. It had been made solely for the purpose of executing Rudolf Höss, and today a board marks the site of the gallows. It says, "This is where the camp Gestapo was located. Prisoners suspected of involvement in the camp's underground resistance movement or of preparing to escape were interrogated here. Many prisoners died as a result of being beaten or tortured. The first commandant of Auschwitz, SS Obersturmbannführer Rudolf Höss, who was tried and sentenced to death after the war by the Polish Supreme National Tribunal, was hanged here on the 16th of April 1947. The gallows were built by German prisoners of war, who made it with a trapdoor at dawn on the day of the execution. On the day of the execution, no one was admitted to witness the execution without holding a special pass, and armed guards were based everywhere. Höss was brought back to the camp he oversaw at 8 AM and was then taken to the camp jail in Block 11, where he drank a cup of coffee. 2 hours later at 10 AM, he was taken out of the death block and was taken to the gallows, walking up the main camp street. His hands had been handcuffed behind his back, and he then arrived at the wooden structure that would take his life. He stood and looked at it, and the executioners helped him stand on a stool above the trapdoor. After this they stood back, and a priest approached the gallows. A prosecutor read out the death sentence, and then the noose was placed around Höss's neck, and then it was adjusted when he moved his head. The hangman then pulled the stool out from underneath him, and Höss's body crashed through the trapdoor and hit part of it. He was executed at 10:08 AM and was pronounced dead 30 minutes later, with his remains then being cremated. However, today the gallows in which Höss was executed on are a popular sight to see within Auschwitz. They have remained a constant reminder of the execution of one of the most evil men in the Nazi regime, who was tasked with mass murder and inflicting so much suffering onto the prisoners of Auschwitz. These gallows of Auschwitz only saw one person having their life taken on them, unlike the many wooden structures scattered around the camp. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.